Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way.
Welcome to the Next Reel Speakeasy on rashpixel.fm. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
Hello, everybody.
On the Next Reel Speakeasy, we invite a guest from the industry to join us, and instead of serving up their favorite cocktails, they serve up movies that they love so that we can all talk about them. I'd like to welcome our guest to this month's show, producer Catherine Hand. Welcome to the show, Catherine.
Well, hello, Andy. Thank you for inviting me.
So glad to have you on board.
Pete, hello,
I'm here.
Pete. Yes,
I know. Chopped liver over here.
I didn't want you to feel left out.
Guys, a good catch. It was close.
That's right. I was almost there. So, Catherine, you've had a busy year as one of the core creative producers on the A Wrinkle in Time film that came out.
I know. I was so excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we talk a little bit about that film, though, I wanted to jump back into your past a little bit and talk about kind of how you got started in the industry and what you've been doing. So my understanding is that you actually got your start working with Norman Lear back.
I did.
Back in the day.
I did. I mean, it was like going to, graduate school at Harvard and Yale all in one. I learned so much from him. He was, the king of the road, so to speak, in the entertainment business at the time I was working for him. And it was a real wonderful opportunity.
So what kind of things were you doing there?
Well, I first started off when the shows that he was producing, writing, directing, and not directing, but producing, All in the Family was on the air, Maude, Stanford and Son, all of them. And I was in the office doing administrative work, and I would back up his secretary sometimes because I had worked in Washington on the Hill and worked for a senator for about a year. And so he knew I had, some kind of experience. And so then he would engage in conversation with me, and I had been a theater major, and he would send me down sometimes to give him notes, and he had a closed circuit TV in his room watching the rehearsals. And I think there was a, kind of a synchronicity, I guess, in the notes I would say and the things he was seeing. So a trust was building up. And then, one day it just so happened that while he was making plans to leave day-to-day television and kind of pursue new endeavors, one thing led to another. And he was thinking about if the Smithsonian would want the Archie and Edith Bunker chairs. And he reached out to the head of publicity and said, call Kathy. And he meant another Kathy in New York. But I heard my name and I said, yes. And he said, oh, Kathy, you worked in Washington. Do you know anyone that's connected to the Smithsonian? And I said, yes, I do. And so I happen to know a late congressman from Indiana named John Bradamus, who went on to become president of New York University. And I called John and I said, John, do you think the Smithsonian would want these chairs? And he said, not only do I think they would want the chairs, I think we should plan a slew of activities, a meeting with the president, the Senate, the Congress, and a reception at the Smithsonian for 1,000 people. So I went back to Norman and I said, well, I think he thinks that they would want them. And so I went from being a receptionist to event producer because of one phone call.
Holy cow.
And so
that is fantastic. Your career is an accident of naming.
You would not believe it. So I went to Washington and I met with people connected to, the Carter administration, the Senate, the House, working with the Smithsonian. And I actually was the person that produced all those events. No cell phone, no internet, and no team. It was me. And so it was great. I mean, it was all really successful. And when it was all over, Norman was really pleased. And because the cast came back, Norman and different executives came back for the events. The one person that didn't come was Carol O'Connor, who had played Archie Bunker because he was ill. So, it was unfortunate that he couldn't come, but everybody else did. Anyway, it was very successful. And Norman asked me if I would like to be his assistant in all of his new endeavors. And I had always wanted to be in the movie business, and he wanted to go and make movies. And I was just so excited and thrilled. And it turned out that working for Norman was part show business and part politics. So I helped him create a nonprofit called People for the American Way, which kind of grew out of the research we did on the film he wanted to make called Religion. Every single day was different than the next, which was why it was so challenging and so exciting. And the incredible people that wanted to meet with him or come to see him, it was really an once in a lifetime experience.
Did you have a sense when you started working for Norman of just the sort of impact that his work was having on entertainment? I mean, at what point does that hit you between the eyes that this guy is going to become a legend?
Well, it was really funny because the people at the office and with Norman, he just went to work every day. Sure. It was hard. It was hard, and he was always, in a wrestling with the actors or the writers of, getting it right, everybody being happy. And someone did an interview with him for 60 minutes. And I remember watching that interview and thinking, wow, I work for him.
Shifted perspective.
Yeah. But I think also the letters that he received really made you realize what an impact he was having. And when I really understood was every single time I made a phone call to try to get in to meet with someone in the course of trying to arrange all of these events, I would just say, my name is Catherine Hand and I'm on calling on behalf of Norman Lear. And it was like all the doors opened. Everybody wanted to meet Norman or wanted to have a conversation with him. And the most interesting thing was that kind of conservative people thought he was just like Archie Bunker, and liberal people thought he was just like Mike Stivic. So Norman had this incredible ability to kind of walk, to do the comedy in such a way that he offended everyone and no one. Everyone thought that they saw themselves in the shows that he did. And that was his true genius, I think, that he made everyone laugh at each other. Working for Norman and in that office, we laughed a lot. Norman was really funny. And at least he was in those days. He was really funny. And so were the other writers and the actors. I mean, they would come walking in and someone would inevitably fall, do some sort of prank of falling or saying something funny. And, it was really fun. If there's any difference that I see in when I started and my experience this past year or so is that there was so much joy. And everybody in the business in the old days came out of theater, or there weren't even that many film schools. The AFI hadn't even been created yet when I started working there. So everybody just wanted to entertain people and make people laugh and write good things and push the envelope. And it really wasn't until about I would say 25, 30 years ago where it started to change. And I think it started to change when Jaws came out. And a lot of people thought, there's a lot of money to be made in this business.
Well, certainly that did shift quite a bit with the whole blockbuster scheme and the way that everything's kind of gone from there. Yeah. Now, were you working with Norman through all of that, or by that point? Because you ended up at Embassy Pictures and American Zoetrope, at a couple different places.
So I started working at Norman's office as a receptionist. That was my first job in 1976. I think All in the Family had been on. Yeah, I think All in the Family had been on the air for 5 years. So it was on for another 3 while I was there. And then from there, I went to work directly just with Norman and his new endeavors from 79 to 83, which I think they bought Embassy Pictures. And then it became Embassy Pictures, Embassy Television, it just became a very big company. From there, it's when I went up to San Francisco and I just was in the right place at the right time. And I got very lucky. And I went to work for a guy named Fred Fuchs, who was the president of Zoetrope, right as they were beginning the pre-production of Godfather 3. And I was really happy to be working on, even if it was a third installment, even if it wasn't as good as the first 2, it was still The Godfather, and I remember my most favorite day was the very first day of the very first read-through. And it was at Rehearsal Hall 22 at Napa Vineyard, where Francis gathered the cast and Mario Puzo and everybody. And they all sat around this long table, Diane Keaton, George Hamilton, Andy Garcia, Al Pacino. They were all around this long table. And then Francis opens the script and he says, "Exterior Vatican Day." And I swear to God, I heard the bugle or the trumpet or whatever.
Totally.
And what was so funny is there were so many different rewrites of that script. I mean, geez, they even had to go back and refilm it and recut it and everything. But that day, I thought it was perfect.
Oh, what a treat. We've talked about that series on the show, and it's such a fantastic series. And the third one certainly has its share of disdain, but boy, it's still such a great film. It really is.
It is. So. I mean, Francis Coppola is a master filmmaker.
Yeah,
and just to be in his presence was just a real treat. And then even at one point he was interested in maybe directing A Wrinkle in Time.
Seriously?
Let's start talking about that now. So how did that story enter your life and all of this? Because it sounds like you obviously already had connections to the story A Wrinkle in Time by the time you were working with Coppola.
Oh yeah. So basically what happened was, when I was working with Norman, a friend of mine, very shortly after I started working for him, a friend of mine said, well, if you had the opportunity, what would you want to produce? And at that time, when they asked me that question, I had never thought about producing anything. And I was just, trying to do, read all of the scripts that Norman gave me, or give him notes and all those kinds of things. And I gave him the book A Wrinkle in Time. Because what had happened was, when I was a little girl, I had read the book and immediately started a letter to Walt Disney to have him make the movie and star me as Meg.
Naturally.
I love that. That's a total kid's dream. Like, yeah,
right.
I think you need to make this, Mr. Walt, and please cast me.
Yeah.
So I was too shy to send the letter. And a couple of years later, he died. And I felt really guilty that I hadn't sent him that letter. And then I thought, man, I better really think of someone else to write a letter to and tell them about A Wrinkle in Time. And I just couldn't think of anyone that made movies for children other than Walt Disney. So since I knew of no one else to tell, I made a promise to myself to grow up and make the movie myself.
Wow.
And that was 50 years ago.
So you pitched it to Norman and said,
so I pitched it to Norman. Yeah, so I pitched it to Norman, and he said, well, he really loved it. And he said, this is beautiful. This is wonderful. But it's not really something for me to write or direct. And I said, well, could I go after the rights anyway? And he said, well, if you can get Alan Horn, who was then the president of his company, to agree, yes. So I sent the book to Alan. Alan read it, said he loved it. He wasn't sure how it could be made, but that I should go for it. So with that, I wrote a letter, did not hesitate. I wrote a letter, sent it to Madeline Langle. And a few days later, I got a collect call from Madeline Langle. And she agreed to meet with me. And I was on a plane to New York, and we met. And, at lunch, I found out that hundreds of people had wanted the rights to A Wrinkle in Time. And I don't know if I was just in the right place at the right time. The fact that I was the first generation that had been exposed to A Wrinkle in Time, and that I worked with Norman Lear, and that, we got along so well, and my love for it was just complete and total. 6 months later, Norman's company had the rights with me as the champion.
But then you left, and the rights stayed kind of with you.
Yeah. So what happened was, Norman still technically owned the option, but he knew how important it was to me. And so he let me pursue it and find another way, other talents, other writers, other co-partners or whatever to bring to the table, and that he would then consider and try and help get the movie made. So it was a very complex, complicated kind of situation, but it wasn't over. I mean, I was still connected to it. And then in 1989, his rights were up, but I had become by that time very close to Madeline Langle. I didn't have the money to option it. And she said, well, go and see if you can set it up elsewhere. And I will not sign a deal unless you are made the producer. And so that's what happened. Yeah. So that's what happened.
And so you've had that kind of exclusivity kind of since then. And I know the one that you just did is the second version that you did.
Yeah.
You did a version, like a TV version in 2003. And then you got this one done. And so the 2003 one, I'm assuming that you weren't as happy with it since you wanted to redo it again.
Yes, right. I think that's a fair assumption.
Okay.
Well, it's such a sweet interview. This NPR interview that you did, talking with Madeline too, when it came, about how it just sort of fell flat. How did it fall flat for you?
Oh, let me count that way. First of all, budget matters.
Sure,
It really matters in every facet of filmmaking. Visual effects were not anywhere near what they are today. You know, if you wanted to have really great effects, you were spending millions and millions of dollars. Whereas today, you know, you can get a lot done for a lot less money. But back in 2002 or 1 or whenever we were filming this, it was really difficult. But I think the number one problem in the very beginning was that, interestingly enough, I had done a deal with Miramax. And then 2 months after I did the deal with Miramax, Disney bought them. And then Disney at the time did not really want to, the people that were in charge didn't want to make the movie. And Bob Weinstein, who I was working with at Miramax, wouldn't give up. And he went to the head of ABC. And the head of ABC loved A Wrinkle in Time and said, yes, let's try it. They would not give us anywhere near the budget we needed unless we could make it for 4 hours. Well, then that meant you had to change the story a lot, because it's really, you know, at the most like a 2-hour movie. But now we had 4 hours that we had to fill. So a lot of changes had to be made. And it's like anything, you know, you start making changes and then all of a sudden you have to make more changes and you have to make more changes.
Yeah, the dominoes fall.
Yeah, the dominoes fall. You know, so there was just so many things that really made it very difficult. You know, I think the timing was right for it to get made, because I had been at it for like 20 years and I was just like exhausted. And I thought, well, I would just take this opportunity. The other, though, was after it was aired and everything, I was so sad that it wasn't my dream. It wasn't what Madeline and I had talked about all these years. And so I was just resolved to try to get it remade as it should be. And that was what I then tried to do for the next 10 years.
What an amazing story. And then, okay, so now you ended up with this this most recent version that you had a big name director, Ava DuVernay, on board to direct it. And Jennifer Lee as one of the writers who had done Frozen. Yeah. And along with Jeff Stockwell and kind of this amazing cast: Oprah Winfrey, Reese Witherspoon, Mindy Kaling, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Michael Pena, the amazing Storm Reed, Zach Galifianakis, and Chris Pine, all a part of this thing. How about this one? Did it all work out? I know it was quite a journey to get to this, and I've got to say, from my perspective, from my daughter watching with the family, it was really an amazing experience for us, and it's just something that my daughter really connected with. So I loved seeing that.
Yeah, you know, I am so happy it was made. I'm very happy that Ava wanted to make it. I was extremely happy that Jennifer Lee wanted to write the screenplay. And I think overall, I was just thrilled that Disney, you know, Sean Bailey, the president of Disney, and our beloved executive, Tim Nagenda, and his associate, Jessica Virtue, that they were all as committed to making a beautiful version of A Wrinkle in Time as I was. You know, it was a thrill that I was able to see this through. It was a very curious thing that I had a certain vision of the movie in my head all these years. Obviously, that's what propelled me forward. But then when you get to a place where you're working with the likes of Jennifer Lee and Ava DuVernay and, you know, Jim Whittaker, the other producer, and all the incredible talent at Disney, collaboration means that other people have to be heard and their voices can be louder than yours, you know? And so it was a wonderful experience for me to really live through what it's like to work with all this talent, this big studio, and to learn how to really collaborate. One of the things that was a little different is that I had read the story as a little girl and brought that young girl's vision of it. That's what I carried in my heart all these years.
Sure.
Ava had never read it as a kid. So what she brought to it was her incredible talent, her experience, and that of someone that had not read it as a child, right? Now, Jennifer had read, an adult perspective, and Jennifer had read it as a child too. So now there was this blend. And what was so interesting is that Ava really did, I think, a beautiful job of what I think the intention of the studio was to bring A Wrinkle in Time in the 21st century. You know, we've changed a lot, in the last 50, 60 years. And it was important that the language be something that meant something to today's audience. And I think Jennifer and Ava really threaded a very difficult needle, to kind of bring it into the 21st century. And I will say the most wonderful thing that Ava did in our very first meeting was to say she was interested, but she wanted a diverse cast. And I was very happy about that, because a long, long time ago, Madeline told me her very favorite line in the book was "like and equal are not the same thing at all." And that she had always promised me, made me promise that line would be in the movie. And when Ava wanted this diverse cast, I thought that embodied that sentiment that meant so much to Madeline L'Engle. So it was kind of like a synchronicity, and then for the movie to come out at this time of, young women's empowerment, kind of like, I don't want to mix it up with the Me Too thing, but, this age of women coming into their own, and a kind of a renaissance for people of color in the arts and everywhere else. It's like it came out the way it should at the exact time it should.
Yeah, and I think, like I said earlier, like my daughter really connected with it, and I love her seeing films with so many female characters, with a diverse cast of female characters that she can really connect with, and it's not even something that she thinks about when she's watching it. It's just an exciting group of characters for her to go on this journey with. And
I know, it's really,
I do think it's important.
That's so great. I'm so glad to hear that. I think what's kind of sad is that young girls and boys love A Wrinkle in Time, but unfortunately, the critics are usually older men, and sometimes men and women. And I don't know if you remember. Oh gosh, what was that great movie that Robert? It's the Silver Bell. The Polar Express. The Polar Express.
Polar Express.
Remember, you get to a certain time where you can't hear the bell anymore.
Yes,
you're right.
and I think your daughter, and definitely me when I read it, we could still hear that bell.
Yeah.
And I think A Wrinkle in Time appeals to the people that can still hear that bell.
Well, the people who can't need to see the movie with people who can, because I find it absolutely contagious, and I deeply enjoyed watching this movie with my kids because they get the same delight on their face that that I do, and it reminds me of my experience reading this book, the whole series as a kid.
I'm so glad.
It's just delightful. I do have one specific question that I have been told I have to ask you, or I might be drummed out of the family on behalf of both of my kids. How could you possibly have let Aunt Beast get cut? Catherine, the floor is yours.
Listen, I join the members of your family. I have loved Aunt Beast my entire life. Aunt Beast is just this incredible character. And what happens with Meg, the beauty of the story that happens between Meg and Aunt Beast is just part of what makes A Wrinkle in Time so special. The language, the dialogue, everything that goes on between them is just really, really important. So I share that. Making movies is a really a tough job, and sometimes really tough decisions have to be made for the sake of the movie. Madeline said in a conversation I had with her when we were working on the script together, because we did work on a script together, and she said, Aunt Beast wasn't written to be filmed. It was written to be read. So all of the stuff that we love about what goes on between Aunt Beast and Meg, the beauty is in reading it. So when we tried to film some of it, it just didn't come across as beautiful as it did in the book. What we did not give up, what we did not lose, and I really think that everybody involved had a hand in this, was that the whole section of Ixchel is just very important to the story when Meg realizes that she's the one to go back and not her father.
Right.
And she's first very angry with him that he's not saving her brother, and then realizes, she apologizes to him and that she wanted her father to make everything easy for her and simple, and that he can't. And that she's the one that has to accept what needs to be done. And so we did not lose that.
Yes.
Which
right.
I think was really, really important. So please tell your daughters and your wife that I share your sadness, but I think it's a better movie that we cut it.
I have to tell you, I personally, as a father of a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, it just reminded me how deeply crushing that sequence is when the father doesn't go back for. And I was just like, oh, I need to leave the room.
Yeah,
I am now associated with this horrible emotion, and I cannot stomach it anymore.
No, but then there's this lovely, lovely moment between Meg and her dad when they finally get home.
Yeah, and Chris Pine Storm Reed just crushed that. I mean, it's just
it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just really
amazing.
Beautiful. So, it
and they got Zach Galifianakis to stand still. I mean, it was just there's so many huge wins in this movie. It makes me.
Zach Galifianakis is one of the nicest guys. Oh, he's just like a love. He's a really nice person.
Oh, that's great to hear because, other than that, it's Between Two Ferns and, it's a different character. Can we talk just a little bit about what's going on, what went on with this movie in the box office? Because I am deeply saddened by it as a money losing thing. And I don't know how to make sense of it in my heart.
I do think that it is important to say that when this movie opened, that it opened, I think, at number 2 at the box office behind Black Panther.
Yeah.
So it was the first weekend where the number 1 and number 2 films were both directed by people of color, which I was so excited when I saw that news.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
It was. And look, I think everyone shares your disappointment. Obviously, the people that worked really hard to bring it to the screen, and nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. I mean, look at Solo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Who can explain
but
that one?
You made a point earlier, which I think is, would be remiss if we didn't at least echo it, which is that, when you talk about the older critics who were not as kind maybe to the movie because they couldn't hear the bell. Well, there is a little bit of this joyless sort of ownership culture. Where there is a population of people who believe they have ownership of certain ideas and properties as fans, and when they don't agree, you look at Solo. When they don't agree, and what has happened horribly with with our Rose in The Last Jedi. I mean, this is a market of toxicity, and I wonder if there isn't a little bit of echo that impacted A Wrinkle in Time.
I would agree. I think that, people that love A Wrinkle in Time fiercely love it. And we're, really expecting, things that maybe they didn't see. And so, they were vocal about that. But on the other hand, I would say that you think about this. Movies have been around for over 100 years. I don't know how many movies that means that have been made, but I would guess hundreds of thousands, pick the number, but not one movie before A Wrinkle in Time had a 13-year-old biracial girl as the lead. Not one.
Wow.
And I hope that as we move forward, that Wrinkle will have a life after, it won't be talked about as, a disappointment at the box office. I hope we get beyond that. Yeah. And we talk about, the beauty and the themes that are in A Wrinkle in Time. 1 month after the movie came out, A Wrinkle in Time, the book, was number 1 on the USA Today's bestseller list.
Oh,
that's great.
That is heartwarming.
So, I think after all is said and done, people will speak kindly of this movie, and it will have a life that we can't even imagine right now. I think, people didn't like The Wizard of Oz. The critics hated The Sound of Music. So I think movies sometimes, even though critics today said they didn't like A Wrinkle in Time, just wait, give it some time. And I think maybe we'll find another life.
Well, especially as our kids grow up, it'll be something that that they've latched onto, and it's
I was going to say I can guarantee my kids are taking it with them, like as they grow up. I guarantee that. Right. But it also reminds me, like the books that I felt even personally even closer to were Wind in the Door and Swiftly Tilting Planet. Like the whole, for me, it was then the trilogy was very important, and I think that's the thing that I had wished for going into this movie, was that there would have been stronger momentum that would have cemented a series.
Well, you and me both.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know, maybe in time that'll turn around and the sequels, will have a life somewhere that we can't see or predict. Movie business is funny. Yeah. Who knows why things get made and others don't. But, I do think that it's a crazy thing how critics and certain people on social media and kind of media in general are pretty tough and harsh and almost cynical. And yet the audience, the people at home, they want stories that are like A Wrinkle in Time. And it's just figuring out, how to reach that audience that wants to be entertained and uplifted and feel good and, have some light come into their life and not just be bombarded with dark, cynical films, which then critics love, right?
Well, yes, it's a frustrating mix, and in the end, the public does find a way to speak their mind, even if it may be decades later. I always think it's interesting looking at the Oscars from decades ago and going, well, this is the movie that won Best Picture, but this is the movie that people still talk about that came out that year. And so it's interesting the way that lives of things end up lasting.
Exactly. And to get onto just a segue for a moment, but I was reading a little bit about The Sound of Music, and behind the scenes, and it was just kind of surprising to find how many of the people that were behind the creative team were so afraid that it would be perceived as saccharine and sentimental, and if anyone was associated with it, they were sorry that they must be really hard up for money, and all that kind of stuff. Where hateful. It turned out to be one of the most number one movies for 1965, and held that until decades later. I think Jaws was the first movie that started, or was it Jaws or Godfather? One of them. It was the first movie that started, Wrinkle in Time going down. Sound of Music going down on that list, but it held that number one position for decades.
Well, you did a nice way of segueing into The Sound of Music. So, the reason that we're here, we were just having such a great conversation about Wrinkle in Time and everything. It's just fascinating stuff to talk about. But yes, the reason that we did bring you here is because we were talking about one of your favorite movies, The Sound of Music. So
that I am willing to admit, there are many people in the movie business who will not admit that they love The Sound of Music.
I have a theory about that, and I think it holds a little bit with films like that and The Wizard of Oz that people grew up with seeing all the time. Those two films were on TV every year, and I watched them every year, and it became such like a recurring part of our life that it's almost like when you're talking about your favorite movies, it can't be one of those because I've seen those too many times, and so has everybody else. It has to be something a little more unique or whatever it is. I think that it becomes so commonplace that people in their minds, they just diminish the quality of it a little bit because it's just so common. But for me, it doesn't take away kind of the grandeur and the quality of the film.
Well, I think what it is that you can say, depending on where you are in your life, there are different films that were brilliant and wonderful. There's a reason why Citizen Kane is rated the number one film, all the time, or Casablanca. Sure. But The Sound of Music, I think if you were having a bad day, it's good to put The Sound of Music on, because you cannot watch that movie and not feel good after you finish watching the film. It just makes you feel good.
I think, and this is I've coined this. Maybe I should trademark it. I call this film a lenticular postcard film, because how many people do you know who, when you talk about The Sound of Music, say, "Oh yeah, I remember that movie," and then you remind them there are Nazis in it, and they're like, "Wait, what?" Like the whole story is about this. It's essentially Mary Poppins with no magic umbrellas, and it stars Mary Poppins. And her name is Maria, and it is remembered, I think, by many as the singing family movie, and not the true story
of the Nazis,
of the Nazis annexing Austria.
I know. You're absolutely right. What's very interesting, though, William Wyler, who was the first director in the early days of bringing the talent together for The Sound of Music. And he was working with Ernest Lehman on the screenplay. And I think a lot of the conversation that he had really impacted the development of the screenplay. And he went on location to Salzburg. But he really wanted to have a big blow up with tanks coming in and the Nazis taking them out. And it was like, because, here was a guy that hated Nazis, and he really wanted to show those damn Nazis, and I don't think that Zanuck and all the other people behind it really saw that right for this musical. And so I think when William Wyler decided not to do it, I think they were secretly relieved. And because I think you're right. I mean, there are Nazis in it, and they really did a great job of helping you forget that.
Yeah, well, until you get to the very end and you realize this is an incredibly intense sequence. Like, this is the sequence in the cemetery is just, I mean, how many times have I seen this movie? And my whole family was watching it this morning, and we're literally on the edge of our seats, on the edge of the couch, watching this
and
movie.
You just
we
wonder,
know how
Rolf
it ends.
Yeah, exactly. And you still wonder, is he going to tell? Is he going to
Yes, Rolf, come on, man.
It gets, it's so tense. And that, as a kid, I remember just watching this, and I was just like, clenching my parents. I was so tense from the scene. It was so terrifying. Watching as an adult, you realize how short that whole sequence is, but it's like, it's such a tense ending for the film. It really.
Well, and when I was a kid, I remember being really concerned that those kids were going to talk. They would cough,
sneeze,
and that would bring the Nazis.
Gerda was going to sneeze,
or they weren't going to be behind that stone and the flashlight that was, behind the gate.
Right, they'd see a shoe.
See it. Yeah, it's so funny,
and it is so interesting, the story of how the whole thing came to be. I've always known the story, I've known the songs and everything, but doing some research on it and realizing, Maria Von Trapp, and the Trapp family singers, her husband had died. And so she kind of wrote this memoir to kind of promote the group and to try to, kind of keep the funds coming in and everything. Absolutely. Yeah. And then, and she tried to sell it to Hollywood, but Hollywood wasn't interested at the time. This was the late 40s. And it was a German producer who ended up buying the rights and made two films that I didn't even know existed. The first one was The Trapp Family, and the second one was The Trapp Family in America. Right. And it's like, I had no idea that those had been in existence. And I was always curious about the credit at the opening where it says, with the partial use of ideas by Georg Hurdelek, who I guess was one of the screenwriters for one of those versions. So.
Well, and what's interesting, in 1961 or 62, I saw the Von Trapp Family Singers movie.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, I saw it. It was playing at the local theater. And I remember loving it, right? But I didn't. It was a while later that I made the connection that the Von Trapp Family Singers, that when The Sound of Music wasn't a remake, I was like, is this a remake of the movie that I saw? But I'll tell you another little funny story when you were talking, a sad story. When Maria Von Trapp sold those rights to, was it Rudolph or Ronald Max Reinhardt? She had asked for $10,000, and she had asked for a piece of the royalties. And he said, well, and he's German, and he said, well, the German law is that we cannot give piece of royalty to a foreigner. And at that time, she had been made an American citizen. And she did it, and she didn't ask her lawyer if it was true. She just thought he was telling the truth. So she signed the deal, got her money, and found out that that did not exist. So if you think about this, that poor woman did not get anything because someone lied to her. I mean, it's basically what happened.
And those two movies became the most successful films in West Germany during the post-war years. So she lost out on all that part of them.
I know. It's kind of sad. But anyway, listen, the entertainment business, as well as every other business, is filled with those kind of stories. But I always think that's so sad.
Well, I didn't hear anything as far as her deal with the U.S. because Paramount eventually bought the rights to make this. I think before it reverted, and then they bought the rights to it, but then they decided to do the stage musical, and then 20th Century Fox ended up getting the rights to that to make the film. So I don't know if she ended up getting any part of that or not.
Well,
but,
she did. I'll tell you
so.
something. Yeah, she got like 700s, 8. Is a small fraction of 1%. But even that would be good. And I don't know if it was I think it was either of the play or the movie. I can't remember. One of them, she got a small percentage because I think they were just trying to be kind. They didn't have to. And I think that they just thought it was the right thing to do.
Well, I think with both of them being a success, I'd like to think that it still ended up working out for her.
Yes, I think
in my head.
Yeah, right.
I mean, but I mean, it's just such a beautiful movie. It's so funny though. I did see it not too long ago, and I thought, oh, it's a little dated, in the way that we make movies today. But there is just so much joy in it,
Well, it's got that kind of that magic from the 60s, the big epics that they were making back in the 60s.
Yeah.
This was Robert Wise's second big epic musical that he did this decade right after West Side Story.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of right in the thick of it. Everybody was looking for this sort of story. Rodgers and Hammerstein had been kind of making all of these big movies and doing such a great job with them. And I think that this is some of their best music. I mean, the songs in this, you can just go down the list of songs and, every time I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, well, Do Re Mi is obviously my favorite. Oh, no, wait, I forgot about the, my favorite things. Oh, I forgot about the Goat Herd song. It's like everything. It's like, I love all those songs.
And the thing that I love, probably one of the top 5 things that I love about the movie is the opening. I mean, when that just comes to the clouds and you hear birds and it comes through the mountains and it keeps going, it looks so beautiful, and the music starts to swell and it just keeps building and it keeps building, and then you see this woman on the top of that hilltop and twirls. I mean, it is just so thrilling. You don't
it's
know
a
exactly
bold
where you're
opening.
It is. It's very bold. And I read someplace that Robert Wise was because the whole opening idea came from Ernest Lehman. And Robert Wise was concerned that it was too similar to kind of like the big opening of West Side Story. So he kind of didn't want to go there. And then Lehman said, okay, we'll come up with something else. And they couldn't. So that's why they stayed with it.
It wins by default. Oh well.
Right?
Well, and it ends up being kind of a really nice bookend for the movie to have this opening sequence that is this beautiful sort of cascading sequence through the Alps, and then the end of the movie is the whole family now back in the Alps, looking really charming and happy, and the weather is lovely, and it's a nice bookend to what is kind of a emotional roller coaster of a movie. Of course, the first thing my wife says as she's reading this is, I don't think the refugees looked that good crossing the Alps on foot. I don't know, but I said, shut up. Nobody asked you.
Yeah. Well, very true. And the other thing too is, I don't know why, but somewhere, I don't know if it's a movie, if it's in, articles that have been written, but don't you have the feeling that they went over that mountain to Switzerland?
I guess I assumed so.
Yeah.
Okay, so Salzburg isn't next to Switzerland.
Right. How would they? How would that?
Now that you say that, I'm like, I better pull up a map because I'm
Right.
not sure.
They didn't. They went over that. They're in real life gone to Italy. But for some reason, I do not know why, but people have said, oh, they went over to Switzerland. But it's like, no, they went to Italy. Anyway, just a little tidbit. But there are so many wonderful stories about the making of the movie. I think everybody involved really loved it. I mean, I think that they saw, even in the early dailies, that they had something very, very special. And it's just kind of ironic that Christopher Plummer, thinks it's so sentimental, and he thinks that he had to be in it and all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of the role that he's most famous for.
It's so funny hearing the stories of him and his opinions of it. How he would make up names for it, like, the sound of mucus.
Yeah.
He was so disdainful of it. But I think it's just something that he's kind of grown to appreciate, at least deal with in a way. Because I know, like, I can't remember if it was Oprah or Ellen or somebody, some daily talk show did like a big anniversary, like 50th anniversary thing, and he finally agreed to appear after all this time of not wanting to talk about it. And I think he's kind of at a place who's like, yeah, okay, I'll grudgingly accept that I was a part of it, and I'll enjoy it a little bit. So
yeah. Well, good for him. He's absolutely shown his chops in so many other movies, so he can be gracious about The Sound of Music, But one time, I was asked, not interviewed, just by a friend, I think, well, what was the music, that you were listening to in the course of trying to get A Wrinkle in Time made? And I never wanted to admit, but I think I played Climb Every Mountain, 3 times a day.
Oh.
What inspiration. That's great.
I was always dealing with rejection and disappointment. And I would play that song, I Have Confidence, on the way to work. That's what I would play.
I love that.
I had the tape, and because it just gave me so much inspiration and confidence to meet my day. And I know that it probably sounds like people want to gag when I say that, but it was true. I think I'm sad that there's so much cynicism for young people, that they live in a world with so much cynicism, because I was just taught to look at the glass half full and not half empty. And I think that kind of attitude and approach to life really has guided me through everything. And I think movies like A Wrinkle in Time fed that attitude and approach.
Sure.
Not A Wrinkle in Time, The Sound of Music. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I talk about A Wrinkle in Time so much. But I meant The Sound of Music. I think Sound of Music, really, it just, I think it's just a really wonderful movie, and I'm not alone, that think that.
It's funny, you mentioned, I Have Confidence in Me as one of the songs, and I didn't know this. Like, I guess thinking about this and wanting to talk about the show, I realized I had no idea, like, in my head, it's like, I never really kind of put two and together. I've never actually seen the stage show version of this. I've only ever watched the musical. It's become such a part of my life that I kind of forgot that there was a musical that existed before this. And then you start looking at, like, all the work that Ernest Lehman did as he was adapting it, and how he had to kind of switch songs from this place to that place. And I was listening to them talk about it on the commentary, and it's like, wow, the Goatherd song was what Maria sings to the kids when they're scared from the thunderstorm.
Yeah.
My favorite things, Maria sings with the nuns. I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I can't even picture that version in my head. It's so weird.
I know. And Ernest Lehman was just, and what I've read, Ernest Lehman was really the champion of this. While the studio was trying to figure it out, producer was trying, Ernest Lehman was the heart and soul of this. He was the one that was trying to get Bob Wise. He thought Julie Andrews was the only one that should play it. He really lived and breathed the sound of music before everyone else kind of got on board. And you know, and one of the things that I read is that he was tried to be very true to the original material. So I think he was looking at the play, and he was looking at the books that Maria had written. I think he was looking at the Von Trapp family singer movies, and like taking bits and pieces from everything to see what, you know, would make sense. One little story I read that I thought was really funny is that he actually had lunch or dinner with Maria Von Trapp. And one of the things that she said to him was that being at the Abbey was so, you know, so strict. And that she even got to the place where, you know, she would kiss the floor before she did anything wrong. And she used that in the movie.
He did.
That moment that Maria Von Trapp actually did is in the movie. And I just love that. I think that's so great.
Did you see the cameo of Maria Von Trapp in the movie during the I Have Confidence song? I feel like
I know she's there, but I didn't know about it until afterward. I haven't gone back to look for her yet.
Oh, she's way in the distance. Man, you need to know to look.
Okay, I feel like I watched it really close and I just missed it. Something about how she crosses under the arch.
She's at the water fountain and way in the back. She's at the water fountain, you know, I think her hand is she's spraying some water or whatever. And way in the back, there is a woman, kind of you only see her silhouette. And she's walking across the plaza, and I think with someone, and that's Maria Von Trapp. And the only reason,
granddaughter, I think.
Yeah, and the only reason why I know is because on some special, they had a kind of, what do you call it, like a laser beam, something that they had that was showing you. Aha, see that? That's Maria
they had
Von
to point
Trapp.
her out.
Yeah, a pointer.
How funny! I love it.
But it was great.
That's too funny.
But, you know, apparently Maria Von Trapp is a pretty powerful person.
Well, and, you know, I think Julie Andrews was such a great choice to play her, because I think Julie Andrews, especially coming off of Mary Poppins, really had just so much strength. And I love the story of when Wise and Lehman found her. You know, they were watching some early test footage of Mary Poppins, which is her first thing. And Wise leaned over to Lehman before they even finished. He says, "Let's go sign this girl before someone else sees this and grabs her."
Right.
You know, they were so taken by her screen presence. And absolutely, I think she's just a delight to watch on screen here.
Oh, I mean, she's just like fantastic. And it was funny years ago when you remember when she got the Kennedy Center honors, Julie Andrews. So I don't know, you know, like a crazy happenstance. I was in the elevator at the Kennedy Center, and she was in the same elevator. And I was so excited to be in the presence of Maria Von Trapp. I couldn't. Usually I always say hello, you know, something. I could not say anything. It was like, my God, there she is.
That's awesome.
I'm sure we all have somebody like that we're like, right? I just wouldn't be able to say anything.
Yeah, the two people in my life that have actually done that to me are Julie Andrews, and once I was in an elevator with Katharine Hepburn, and the exact same thing happened. I was just in awe. I totally in awe, and couldn't say anything.
Well, you know what's so great about this casting too is that Christopher Plummer, just the way he aged, really pulls it off. I mean, the real story, apparently there's a 25-year gap between Maria and Captain Von Trapp. And in this movie, I mean, Christopher Plummer and Julie Andrews are only 6 years difference in age. And yet I think it really works. She looks so fresh-faced and young, and he looks just kind of aged and grizzled enough.
Oh, I know. And that dance, when they do that, it's so romantic.
Yeah, so romantic.
It really is.
So romantic. And, you know, I'm telling you, I said, as my one comment on this, is snarky comment on this as I was watching it, is, man, The Sound of Music was the best season of The Bachelor, right? When he tells the Baroness to go pound sand and goes out to the garden in the dark and says, you know, when they have their little conversation, so close, so soft focus about, you know, I have to say I love you, you know, couldn't say I love you to somebody and not mean it. My heart skipped a beat. I was like, that's just so romantic. I can't believe it. I'm gonna
it was romantic. And then the kids were so cute.
Yeah.
I mean,
They were
who
great.
didn't want, I wanted to be one of those kids, but I was too
Absolutely.
old. I couldn't audition. I was too old.
Except I swear that those outfits that she makes out of the drapes, every time I watch, I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe anybody would wear those play
I
clothes.
know.
That they all wear them. It seems that, oh my God, the
I
floral
know.
lederhosen.
I know, later
right?
made out of drapes.
So good.
One thing I read that I thought was really interesting. Forever, I always thought Edelweiss was a true Australian folk song. I mean, I always did. And then, of course, you find out, no, Roger Hammerstein wrote that. But that was the very last song that Oscar Hammerstein ever wrote. And then after he wrote that, not too long after he wrote it, he died.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. So, I mean,
that's...
it's a very special song because I love that song. It's so simple. It says everything that, we all feel about, country we love or whatever, people we
country,
love.
family, all that.
Yeah, all of it. And that was his last song. That was kind of
and that's another one that Lehman expanded on in the film, because in the play, it only was ever performed at the end when they're performing at the playhouse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's like, this song is so good, we have to bring it in earlier, and so that's why we have the captain singing it earlier. And it's like, thank goodness that they do, because it really, it's a perfect song for him to sing with his family.
Yeah, because now when you hear it the first time, then it's even more poignant when he sings it the second time, and he knows that's he's leaving, and it really catches you. I mean, it really and then he couldn't get through it, and she has to finish it for him. I mean, I'm telling you, they really knew how to get you with the tears. I love that. Can you tell I love this movie?
Well, and what was great about the what you just said with the tears and stuff is, it really struck me watching this time how kind of gracious the Baroness is, and how she's kind of realizing, this is not the right guy for me. And I couldn't help but feel like this was something that Nora Ephron must have just watched before she wrote the scene in Sleepless in Seattle, when Bill Pullman's character says, you know what, I am better. I'm going to go find somebody else, and just the way that the breakups happened in those two films, I'm like, God, it was really strong.
Yeah. But when I saw that recently, I thought, that had to have been written by a man, because I know of no woman that would have done that so well.
It is such a textbook sort of narcissistic response, right? There are a couple of these, just the expert demonstration of narcissism and of ADHD. I mean, Maria, if she doesn't have just classic young adult ADHD, I don't know what it is at the beginning. It's just so good. Like,
definitely, you think, yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a woman that cannot stay still.
Right. And even the nuns want to kick her out. Like, even the nuns. So.
I know, so, but it was really great. And one thing though, have you ever been to one of those sing-alongs?
It's funny that you say that. I was actually looking, kind of just finding out some kind of facts and tidbits about it. And I was reading about these sing-along Sound of Music shows. I mean, they started, I guess, back in 99, and they've happened on and off, but there's like some theaters. There's one in London that has been having them consistently running since 2016. They're like amazingly popular.
I know. I've never brought myself to do that, because I'm not like obsessed. but there was this woman in Vienna, I guess, or somewhere, and she's like the Guinness World. How do you say that?
Guinness Book of World Records?
Yeah, Guinness Book of World Records, 940 times.
Oh my goodness.
That she had seen The Sound of Music.
Wait, so what do you do with these things? That. You go and you just sing along? Is it like a Rocky Horror kind of a thing?
Yeah,
yes,
right.
Exactly.
People dress up like nuns and the kids and everything. Yeah, it's totally the same thing.
And they all get to sing Do, Re, Mi. They all get to sing all of this, So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Do they still go on? They're still it's still as popular. Like I said, there's this theater in London that's been doing it consistently, like since 2016. Like, I am assuming it's once a week, like every weekend or something. Yeah. Well, I will say, I'm just really glad that no one's ever yet wanted to remake it.
Well, there was the Sound of Music live version that was on TV, 2013.
Yes. I know that was, but it was okay.
Well, that's a different thing.
Was that the movie, or did they do the movie or the play?
An adaptation based on the musical itself, and not the 1965 film version.
Yeah.
Oh,
there
so
you
it
go.
was.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay because it's television, I mean,
Well,
I
and
just
it's the
look at
live thing.
anything.
They started this whole trend of these live annual
Yeah.
things, which I love that they started doing that. I haven't been a fan of watching them because it's something I kind of struggle through with some of them. But I still love that they're creating that. It's kind of bringing people around to watch that. But still,
Yeah.
if it's going to be The Sound of Music, this is the version I want to watch.
Yeah. No, I think that I agree with you.
Okay, so how did it do in award season, Andy?
It was pretty popular at the awards for its time. It had 17 wins, 13 other nominations. Over at the Oscars, it ended up winning Best Picture, Best Director, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, and Best Music Scoring of a Music Adaptation or Treatment. I love when they had to have such complicated music categories at the Oscars. The other nominations, Julie Andrews was nominated for Best Actress, but she lost to Julie Christie for Darling, which I've never seen.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. Again, going back to films that you talk about and films you don't, right?
Why didn't she win?
My hunch is that it was because she had just won for Mary Poppins the year before.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So, Peggy Wood was nominated as she was the head nun.
Did she win?
She was nominated for supporting. She lost to Shelley Winters in A Patch of Blue. Another one.
Oh, that's okay. Shelley Winters should have won. She
Okay.
was great in A Patch of Blue.
Best color cinematography, best art direction, set decoration, and best costume design all lost to Dr. Zhivago, which
Oh well,
It was the curtains.
I can see that.
yeah, I can too. The ice castle, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What about in the budget? I mean, we've been since we've been talking about performance. Obviously, this thing did pretty well.
Yeah, Robert Wise had $8.2 million to make his epic musical, which is about $62.6 million in today's dollars. The movie opened. Yeah, I know. It seems so low for a film like this.
Yeah, right.
The movie opened March 2nd, 1965, initially as a roadshow theatrical release, and then expanded across the country. Critics were mixed on it, but it did become an instant hit, and in just 4 weeks had become the number one movie at the box office, and became not only the highest grossing film of the year, but one of the most profitable films out there. In fact, by November of 1966, it had become the highest grossing film ever, beating out Gone with the Wind, a position which it held for 5 years.
Wow.
Right, I know. It ended up breaking box office records in 29 other countries and had its initial theatrical release in the U.S. for 4.5 years. That blows my mind.
Wow.
Wait a minute. You could go see that in a movie theater
Yes.
for 4.5 years?
Can you believe that? But in late 1969, you could still go see The Sound of Music in theaters.
Oh my goodness! I just watched A Wrinkle in Time in my house.
Yeah. I mean, that's like shocking. I didn't know that. Wow. That's
Well, if you think
amazing.
about it, they had no other way to watch movies. So if you wanted to go see a movie, that was it. So,
Yeah.
and in some cities in the United States, the number of tickets sold exceeded the total population of the city. So
Oh my gosh.
it is crazy.
That's because people were seeing it 3 and 4 times.
Exactly. It did have 2 subsequent re-releases in 1973 and 1990, which have all been very successful. All told, the movie raked in $163.2 million domestically, and it was in fact the first film to gross over $100 million at the box office.
It was Sound of Music.
Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Yeah. And it grossed $123 million internationally, giving it a total adjusted gross of just under $2.2 billion. So very successful.
God.
And when you look at all-time,
Oh my gosh.
when you look at
That's
all-time
amazing.
adjusted domestic gross, this film is just behind Gone with the Wind and Star Wars. So
those are the top 3?
those are the top 3 for domestic adjusted gross. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it lands the film at a profit to cost ratio of nearly 35% of what it made back. And it gave it an adjusted profit per finished minute of $12.2 million.
$12.2 million a minute.
So don't you wonder if the studio thinks it's in profit and they should be starting to pay people now?
Yeah, right?
You know what? Weirdly, I don't actually wonder that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, they've still found ways to make it sound like it lost.
Exactly.
I'm telling you,
That disappointment of The Sound of Music.
I know, right? That 2 billion. Well, maybe we should start, paying out people.
Jeez.
But
So
God.
funny.
Well,
I'm so excited to know that it did so well.
Oh, right.
Oh,
What an
absolutely.
auspicious pick. I think at this point we should probably get to the most contentious part of the show where we rank it.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see the all of the films we've talked about on this show. Or if you swipe over in your show notes, you will see the word Flickchart. Go ahead and tap on it. It'll take you right to Flickchart, to this movie where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours. Very excited to see how this works.
All right. First up, we have The Sound of Music or Star Trek Beyond. Well,
Is that the one with? No, that's not the Wrath of Khan, right?
No, Star
No.
Trek Beyond is the most recent one.
Okay, so Sound of Music.
Sound of Music for me, too.
Yeah. The Sound of Music or Predestination, an interesting little time travel or time bending movie. Sound of Music.
I can go Sound of Music.
Yep, Sound of Music for me, too.
The Sound of Music. Oh, speaking of Catherine, or Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
Oh, well, I did like the Wrath of Khan, but Sound of
It is very
Music.
good.
I'm going to go Sound of Music.
Yep, Sound
Yeah,
of
me
Music.
too.
The Sound of Music. It's getting tough now. Or All the President's Men.
Oh, Sound of Music. I liked All the President's Men. I really did. I thought it was good. But I think Sound of Music as a whole is a better movie.
I'm going to say Sound of Music, Pete.
It's a principled loss. I would have chosen All the President's Men. Just it's there in my heart, but I don't feel bad about losing. There you go.
Okay.
Okay,
all
you
right.
can be the outlier.
Yeah.
You're the outlier.
The Sound of Music or Die Hard.
Oh, wow. Two opposing.
Two
Well, wait a
annual
minute.
Christmas movies.
So let me ask you something. Am I on a decided island, one TV set, and these are my choices?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm always gonna want to be uplifted. I'll have to choose Sound of Music.
I think for
Andy?
this one, I'm going to go Die Hard. I am.
I love Die Hard,
It's so good.
but I just can't. I mean, it's
No,
gonna be
I totally
really,
hear you. I
really
totally hear you.
tough to get me to change from Sound of Music.
This is you have to just know where this movie is for Andy and I in our youth, and I think I'm gonna have to go Die Hard too. Just
Okay,
just because of that.
I respect that. I do. I respect it.
Very much are growing up with that one.
Of a piece.
This is an interesting pairing. So one brings you up and one really brings you down. The Sound of Music or Requiem for a Dream.
Oh my God.
Oh wow. Well, I'm going to go with the Sound of Music.
I'm hands down The Sound of Music.
Sound of Music for me. A Requiem is an amazing and powerful film, but whew, boy, does it beat you up.
Yeah.
The Sound of Music or Touch of Evil, little Orson Welles.
Oh, Sound of Music. I didn't think Touch of Evil was all that great. I thought it was okay. Orson Welles is a genius. I mean, Or,
I feel like I'm going to say Touch of Evil, but now I feel embarrassed saying that.
you can say Touch of Evil. I just remember the shadows.
Yes.
Well,
Pete, what did you
I am
say?
Sound of Music, so
All right. Well, there you go. Principled loss. The Sound of Music or Groundhog Day.
oh
Oh
dear.
no, that's tough.
It's really tough.
Oh no.
I have to say the Sound of Music, but I did think Groundhog. I thought Bill Murray was so good.
It's such a great movie.
Oh, it was.
I think I'm
And I just saw that not
Groundhog
too
Day,
long
you guys.
ago.
I
What's
think
that?
I'm Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Well, I want one of them to be because it deserves one vote,
Yeah. Well,
maybe
yeah.
even two.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
going to give it to Groundhog Day too, which I feel
Okay.
really guilty about.
I
feel so
know.
guilty.
it
No, don't feel
hurts.
guilty. Don't feel guilty. It's all right.
Well, that one is weirdly. I feel my mother judging me. Is that weird? Like, because I know she'd be reprimanding me for
No.
picking anything over Sound of Music.
No, but I think it's okay because it's funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, that puts The Sound of Music at spot 14 on our chart out of 358 movies. So it shot
Wow.
way
That's
up
very
to the
good.
top. So absolutely great pick.
Well, I hope this conversation has encouraged your audience to see A Wrinkle in Time and to see The Sound of Music.
Absolutely. If you had to give this a star rating out of 5 stars, I'm assuming you'd give it 5 stars, but just to
I
be
think
on the
that's-
safe side.
I think that's an honest, good assumption. I mean, I think that means listening to this conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Andy, that
Well,
probably means
Catherine-
you're right about 2.5 stars, right? Because you probably have some quibbles. I think 5
Yes, I would
stars all
give it a
around.
firm 5 stars and
Yeah.
a like. So I'm way up there with this one.
All right.
you guys are so nice. Usually people just like make fun of me for liking The Sound of Music, and it seems
What?
like you liked it too.
Oh, no, absolutely. This is a great pick. This is a
Oh,
great
good.
pick.
It's an
good.
annual favorite, something the whole family just loves to watch. So it's
Oh,
really
good.
a fantastic one to pick. And I think I
should
told
say-
you we had
I should
just
say
done it.
also, Dee Wallace was on the show, Dee Wallace.
Oh, yeah.
And she called both Andy and I a couple of wussies. So I don't know if that plays into it. Why we love it so much.
You're not supposed to keep telling people that, Pete.
No, but I mean, I think, look, you give cover. I mean, one of the things, sometimes you give cover to people who are too shy to like admit that they like it. And so if you like it, then it's like, okay for someone else to say, oh yeah, I liked it too.
Absolutely.
good.
Absolutely.
That's a
Yeah.
gracious way to put it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Catherine, are you on social media? Like, are you out there in the social circles? If people wanted
I
to find
am
you?
in a limited way, Made by Hand 5 and Twitter.
Made by Hand 5.
Yeah, Made by Hand 5.
Is that the number 5?
Made by
Gotcha.
Hand 5 Twitter. I mean, Ava DuVernay is the queen of Twitter, and during the production, I'm telling you, she is really unbelievable.
She's everywhere.
And so during production, she was always posting and we all just felt like we were just Luddites, that we knew nothing. And so she kind of taught us all how to like have a handle and post things. And I must say, now that I'm kind of more aware of it, it's fun. Although there are some people that use it that really do diabolical things with it, like, other people.
Yeah, there are some awful people out there. Yeah.
No, terrible. But it's fun. And so isn't that the only... and Instagram. But I don't really... That's only for like I do with my family.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll post the Twitter.
We got you on Twitter.
Yeah,
That's perfect. People want to follow you there.
Well, guys, this was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Catherine. We had such a fantastic conversation with you. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Me too. And go and tell your friends to rent or buy A Wrinkle in Time.
Absolutely.
Noted.
Definitely
All
check
the
it
links. We'll put all the links in the show notes to check out Catherine's good work. And thank you so much, Catherine. You're a delight. And thanks for putting up with all of our shenanigans.
I loved it.
And for everybody else out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, but you can't wait until next week's show, you can support us over on patreon.com/thenextreel to get involved in more stuff.
You can also learn about us at thenextreel.com. You can subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Next Reel.
Thanks for tuning in to The Next Reel, everybody. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
I'm gonna use you to be my friend.
I love having these wonderful chats on movies we like with all these industry guests talking about some of their favorite movies.
So many great conversations on that show about so many great movies.
We have so much fun having these conversations, but producing the show week after week does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these incredible conversations.
The originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material for all the adapted film discussions on the Next Reel's family of podcasts. Purchasing through our links supports the show.
It's your one-stop shop for Amazon and Apple links where you can buy your copy of the original source material.
Original material for movies we like, movies like Casino Royale,
The Silent Partner,
Never Let Me Go,
Silver Linings Playbook,
There Will Be Blood, based on Upton Sinclair's Oil.
I believe it's Oil!
Oh yeah, I forgot the exclamation point.
Plus, by using those links to buy your next read, Apple and Amazon show us a little bit of love, which allows you to support our family of shows with minimal effort.
thenextreel.com/originals. It's a great way to support the show and find your next page turner.
That's right. Head over to thenextreel.com/originals to pick out your next read and dig in today.